President Muhammadu Buhari has given assurances that next Saturday's governorship election in Ondo State will be free, fair, and credible. The president's message was delivered virtually at yesterday's grand finale of the All Progressive Congress governorship election campaign held at the Akure Township Stadium in Ondo State. He promised that security agents will perform their duties creditably to forestall a breakdown of law and order by unscrupulous elements. President Buhari expressed his support for APC's governorship candidate and incumbent Rotimi Akeredolu because of a need for him to consolidate on his achievements in office. Ahead of Saturday's governorship election in the state, the President, Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, and Chairman of APC's National Caretaker and Extraordinary Convention Planning Committee and Yobe State Governor, Mala Mai Birni, and Chairman APC National Campaign Council for Ondo State governorship election, a legal state governor, Babat Jide Sanwo-Olu, and several other leaders of the party used the opportunity to rally support for the re-election of Governor Akeredolu. Dr. Apati, the president has said that we're going to have free, fair elections, credible elections, just like he said, en route to the Edo elections. What's your take on this?
Well, I mean, the president has been consistent in calling for free, fair, and credible elections. He said the same thing ahead of the election in Edo State, which in fact generated a lot of anxiety. But at the end of the day, the process went very well. Now, in Ondo State, the gubernatorial election will be on Saturday, October 10, and everyone had been looking forward to that. And just as we had anxiety about the election in Edo State on September 19, people have also expressed anxiety about Ondo State, where there have been reported cases of violent attacks with the two major political parties in the race, the APC and the People's Democratic Party, trading blames for the most part. And yesterday, the two major parties had the final lap of their political campaigns, political rallies. One curious thing about that was that it attracted, as you have seen elsewhere, big weights, heavyweights, on both sides from virtually every part of the country. There were, at least according to the last count, about 9 APC governors on the ground in Ondo State. And in the city of Ondo, a few kilometers away, there were as many as over 12 People's Democratic Party governors, not to talk of party leaders. And all of that, again, will indicate that the stakes are just as high in Edo State as they were in Ondo State as they were in Edo State on September 19. But the major concern, of course, is for that process to be free, fair, and credible. INEC insists that it is ready, it is prepared, that everything is in place, that the 5,000 card readers that got up in flames have been replaced. So we may not have, according to INEC, anxiety about card readers working or not. The Inspector General of Police has deployed a DIG and a team of police commissioners and a total of 33,760 policemen to man 3,009 polling units in 203 wards in an election involving just about 17 gubernatorial candidates. Although we understand that some of those gubernatorial candidates have decided to move one way or the other and that we could have on Saturday a two-horse race. But whatever it is, the political gladiators in Ondo State should heed the appeal, the advice of the Inspector General of Police, the President, and also the Vice President. 3 of them have called for peaceful election and good conduct. And we hope that the Inspector General of Police is charged to his men, that they should be professional in their conduct. I hope that that call will be heeded. And of course, everyone should know that this is not a local election. Right. The international community is interested in it, and we've been told that there will be sanctions if anybody should violate the integrity of the democratic process, not just locally, but also internationally.
I mean, very well said, Dr. Abati. Let's just pray the best man wins, and let's pray for peace, and let's pray they adhere to the peace accord, most importantly, that they have signed. I saw the debates, the issues were front burner on the debate yesterday between the two candidates. Very exciting debate, very exciting prospect for the state. And let's just hope, most importantly, to deliver the dividends of democracy to the yearning people of Ondo State. Let's move over to America now. There was another debate in America. The United States vice presidential debate ahead of the next month's presidential election has come and gone. Republican Mike Pence firmly defended President Trump's administration handling of COVID-19 pandemic that has killed more than 210,000 Americans while his Democratic challenger, Senator Kamala Harris, condemned what she called the greatest failure of any presidential administration. Because of the ongoing virus, the candidates were separated by plexiglass barriers, which was a far more civil affair than last week's presidential face-off between President Donald Trump and now back in Washington recovering from COVID-19 and former Vice President Joe Biden. Arise correspondent Laurie Lade monitored the VP debate and now joins us to put a perspective on it. Okay, before we check Laurie, Dr. Abati, it was more civil debate. People got their points out. The poll came out yesterday to say Kamala Harris won the debate 58% by debate watchers, and Mike Pence had about 38% by some debate watchers sampled by a TV network in America. I mean, what's your take about the debate? High points for you?
Well, it was a more civilized affair than the debate that the main candidates had previously, when there was a lot of interruption and a lot of abuse of platform. But again, you could see the two candidates yesterday, trying to make an effort to raise the level of the debate. The Presidential Commission on Debates had said, the U.S. Commission on Presidential Debates had said more measures will be taken to prevent people from violating COVID-19 rules. And you could also see that in place. The insistence on the wearing of masks, the distancing, and then the use of the plexiglass that separated the two debaters. What were the main issues? COVID-19 and the management of it, of course, dominated the debate. The status of the national economy was one of the issues. National health care plans was part of it. And then there was also climate change dominating the discussion. But my major takeaway from it was that Vice President Mike Pence, was using the platform to repeat the same inaccuracies, the same lies, that President Trump had been purveying, either with regard to COVID-19 or to the status of the economy or the achievement of the administration or even with climate change. I mean, Mike Pence was saying, for example, that the administration, the Trump administration, has done very well with regard to the management of COVID-19. I'm not too sure that anybody will consider that an exact, or a correct position, given what we have seen with regard to President Trump's own attitude and the general management of it. He referred to the nomination of Amy Corbett.
Yeah.
Yes.
Amy Coney Barrett.
Amy Coney Barrett. Okay. As an outdoor event. Now that again was not exact. Yes, there was an event in the Rose Garden, but there were prior meetings before they went out to the Rose Garden, and that was why a lot of people expressed concern. Then a number of inaccuracies about the position of President Biden. He was saying that President Biden was supporting abortion up to the point of birth. Now, that is not true, if you fact-check it. So if you fact-check many of the submissions by Vice President Mike Pence, you just see that there were too many lies, too many inexactitudes. Yeah, on Kamala Harris' side, yes, one or two inaccuracies also in her presentation, but on the whole, she gave a better performance in many people's estimation. And that's why you see the public assessment, that you referred to earlier. That's why you see that it was a higher mark to Kamala Harris. But they are having just one debate. So the concern is, will the October 15th debate, the second presidential debate, will it take place? In the meantime, you could see a lot of desperation on the side of the Republicans, and particularly President Trump. Now that we're told that Joe Biden is leading with about 16% in the polls. And if that is the case, the blue wave that we suspect would happen, that's the Democrats sweeping the polls, may well happen. But perhaps, it's too early, perhaps, to jump to that conclusion, because at the end of the day, we've made certain predictions in the past. And then on election day, you see a different thing. Yesterday, Mike Pence was still talking about mail-in voter fraud, fraud. But of course, that is not true. Voter mail-in had been used before. But in any case, it was an interesting debate, much more civil.
I mean, I felt for Mike Pence yesterday, Dr. Abati, because he was trying to defend the indefensible, his principle, put him in a tight corner already. His outlook was quite very calm, but a lot of people will not, listen to that because he was spewing out pure lies. All the fact-checking, most of them done, as you stated rightly, was wrong. And it was a debate skewed towards Kamala Harris. Like you talked about the national polls, even Florida, that Trump thinks is going to do well. The Democrats are leading in Florida and some other senatorial states and things like that. So, I mean, we'll take a quick break now. That's all the news headlines. Take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the U.S. presidential, vice presidential debate chat. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. We're still talking about the vice presidential debate that happened yesterday. I mean, let's just take a little glimmer into what happened yesterday, how proceedings went between Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence yesterday. I mean, when I say Vice President in my head, it just goes to Joe Biden. I don't know why, but we'll just take a little, view on that and come back and talk more about that debate yesterday.
Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the vice president and the president were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare?
The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president.
All right. I mean, we'll just quickly take Laurie Laird in London. Laurie, great to have you. It's a beautiful morning right here. And we'd just like to take your read.
Good morning. It's
All right. Yeah. Good morning, Laurie. Hi, Laurie.
Good morning. Absolutely. It was a lot of American friends have told me that this debate was so much less fun. It was less interesting than that absolute rancor that we saw between Joe Biden and Donald Trump the week before. It was certainly a more understated affair. But anyone who was hoping they might get some sort of sense of policy, because the presidential debate was very much light on policy. A lot of people, and I'll put myself in that category, were hoping that we might get something more on policy. Not a bit of it. The two vice presidential candidates traded barbs more politely, with more decorum than we saw in the presidential debate. But we didn't get into any sort of policy there. Mike Pence certainly gave the impression of cool competence, as he did during the debates in 2016. He gave the impression of a grown-up in the room. Kamala Harris also, I thought, came across as extremely calm. incompetent. I think the takeaway that most people have is it seemed as if Mike Pence continued to interrupt Kamala Harris, had very, very little regard for the rules. The moderator seemed to have trouble keeping him from taking his allotted time. That said, one of the U.S. networks came up timed how much speaking time each of the candidates had, and they were very, very similar, even though it did feel like Mike Pence was continually cutting into Kamala Harris's time.
Right, very valid point there. COVID-19 was a big sticking point in this debate. How do you think Mike Pence answered the defense of this administration's fight against COVID-19?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that question because they did start out with COVID-19. But Kamala Harris didn't seem to really press what many people would think would be the Democrats' advantage in this area. She scarcely even mentioned the fact that the White House has seemed to become almost ground zero for infections in Washington, D.C. The president himself was stricken, his wife, and so many of his inner circle have tested positive. Kamala Harris did not press that point as strongly as I would have thought. But both candidates did a pretty good job in avoiding questions they didn't like. It seemed a little bit more obvious from Pence than it did from Harris, but we saw a little of that with both of them. If they couldn't answer a question, they just pivoted to something else they wanted to talk about. One of the second questions was the role of a vice president. How important is a vice president? And the undertone here was that either candidate who wins for the presidency at either 74 or age 78 will be the oldest president to ever take office. So the role of the vice president after November will be as important as it ever has been. Mike Pence didn't answer this one at all. He somehow turned the question around and congratulated Kamala Harris for her historical nomination, being an Asian American, being an African American woman, first to ever be a vice presidential nominee for that. But he never answered the question, and we saw a lot of that from both candidates.
Well, Laurie, how much impact do you think this vice presidential debate is likely to have on the outcome of the presidential election, beyond the opportunity of just seeing the two candidates debating and defending their principles?
Well, it's another really good question because historically, a vice presidential debate hasn't moved the needle at all. People are not that interested. You could argue that this one, because of the age of the two presidential candidates, you could argue that this one had more importance. Certainly the likelihood of a vice president having to step in, or the likelihood of, say, if Joe Biden were to win, he'd be a one-term president. Many people said that we were actually looking at a preview of the 2024 election where these two candidates could both be their party's nominee for president. But that said, despite the fact that the office of the vice president this time around could become extremely important, I don't think that this debate moved the needle at all. Mike Pence managed to present as a fairly calm, a grown-up in the room. Kamala Harris presented as somebody very clever, very well-spoken. Both, if you tend to their base, both candidates came across as rather likable. So I'm not sure that anyone learned anything new from this debate.
Various polls in the U.S. indicate that the Democrats are comfortably ahead and that Vice President Biden has a comfortable double-digit lead. Can we rely on that as a measure of the likely outcome, or the polls could fail and we could have a different outcome with the Republicans still managing to take the presidency? What's your take on that?
Well, it's an interesting question, and you're absolutely right that nationwide polls show Biden opening up his lead to, as you mentioned, double digits. But I think you need to look underneath that data. You need to look at the more granular data. And while Joe Biden has opened up a lead in some crucial states, his lead in those swing states, and I'm talking about places like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Florida, although his lead in Florida looks like it really has opened up. But in some of those states, Pennsylvania and Ohio, he is holding a lead over Trump, but it's more like 3 to 4 points rather than that 10 points we're seeing nationwide. And I think if you want to get a sense of where this campaign may go, you need to look at that more granular data and look at those swing states. Certainly, Biden is ahead of where Hillary Clinton was at this point in the race in 2016. But I think one of the things that the Democrats will worry about is if polls show that Joe Biden is very far in the lead, does that mean people may stay at home in November? The Democrats and the Republicans want to make sure that their base gets out and votes. They do not want to see any sense of complacency.
Well, thank you very much, Laurie.
All right, very well said. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael and Aaron to give us updates in Africa, global business, COVID-19, and everything. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to the morning show right here on the Rise News channel. Let's just go straight to our dependable Rotus now. Rotus Adiri, hey, how you doing?
And good morning, Doctor. I'm doing good. So for African Business Updates, we kick off with the WTO nominees, the final two. According to Bloomberg, there are just 2 nominees left, and we're looking at them right now. Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of Nigeria, of course, former Finance Minister, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Also, Yoo Myung-hee, South Korean Trade Minister. There has been no official update from the WTO, but it is expected that David Walker, who is the General Counsel Chairman of the WTO, is expected to make an announcement this morning in Geneva, according to what Bloomberg is saying. So it's going to be the first time we're getting a female woman lead at the WTO. And again, we've talked a lot about the challenges that lay ahead for whoever is picked. Let's look at a quote from William Reich. He is, of course, a senior advisor, Center for Strategic and International Studies. Says they're both very well qualified. It's going to be a fight. The challenge will be restoring the WTO's reputation. You need members to have confidence that the WTO is capable of solving problems, and right now that confidence is eroded. He also served in the Clinton administration. Yesterday's debates, even what China came up between Vice President Mike Pence and Kamala Harris. They were talking about, trade. It was one of the issues that they discussed at the debate. And so you continue to see that trade is a big issue with respect to the globe and respect to the United States. I think the United States now, their trade deficit is at a 14-year high. So, and Donald Trump promised to reduce the trade deficit. So, he's pushed for wanting more bilateral trade agreements. The WTO wants more multilateral trade agreements. There's going to be a lot of pressure on whoever takes this job. So, we'll see. We're going to wait to see the official announcement for the WTO. But first, the Financial Times, our sister publication this day, Bloomberg, a lot of reports have pretty much, predicted this, that it was going to be the 2 of them. And here we are. So we'll wait to see that announcement. And if I may say so myself, fingers crossed and good luck to Dr. Okonjo-Iweala. Hopefully she gets the position. We move on to a very interesting back and forth in education between the Minister of State for Education and the President of the Academic Staff Union Universities, ASU. That, of course, is Mr. Chukwuemeka Nwajuba. Here's a quote. He's talking about the amount of money that's being eaten up by professors in universities. He says the bulk of the money that is in education is paid to these professors. There are 71,000 lecturers in Nigeria, but 10,500 of them as professors. There are some countries that don't even have up to 2,000. Now, he now references references the amount of funds that the ASU is asking for. And if we take a look at his next quote, it says, so it's not enough to simply say that we should bring more money. From where? The 2020 budget underperformed as low as 62%. We didn't even collect revenue. There were no companies functioning to pay taxes. A bit extreme there. I mean, some companies obviously pay taxes, but I think he gave an interview to the Punch. Now, the Professor Biodun Oguyemi, who is the president of ASU, responded saying, "Are you saying you don't want to pay professors? That professors are the least paid in the world?" In fact, when we talked on the World Teacher Day, Doctor was talking about how educators in Nigeria are being treated. So this, of course, is all prefaced on the 6-month strike. I think the strike has been going on since March now for ASU. There are agreements between them and the government that weren't met. There's also the integrated payroll and personal information system that they were supposed to be getting on board with that they've refused to. That's ASU. So the back and forth continues. What the Minister of State is saying that, look, you cannot continue this strike. You're affecting the economy. He even said that they are driving more students to private universities than overseas. Not sure how true that is, but the strikes, as long as the strikes continue, universities are affected. Professor Biodun Oguyemi came back and said, well, in countries where you want to innovate and want to push your economy forward, you spend more on education. 2018, 605 billion naira was budgeted for education. 2018 was 605 billion. 2019 was 620 billion. 2020 was 671 billion as far as education is concerned. That comes out to about 1.2, $1.3 billion. So more needs to be spent as far as education is concerned in Nigeria. So we'll have to see how things go. But there is also a narrative about how much is spent, on these functions. The back and forth is that, look, should you be spending more on these professors? Are we getting what we need from them with respect to the output of students? So it's a long-running saga that continues as far as the ASU strike is concerned. Then finally, David Malpass is president of the World Bank, was speaking about a new report that they just put out, I believe it was yesterday, saying that 150 million more people will fall into poverty in 2021. And he's saying that 8 out of 10 of every one of those people will come from middle-income and low-income countries. And it has to be said, one point I need to make on this is that a lot has been said about how Africa has avoided fatalities from COVID-19. But if you look at the impact, yesterday we talked about the Bureau of Statistics and their socioeconomic reports on families families that have been affected by COVID-19 in Nigeria. 55% of families borrowing money from family members, 55% of households borrowing money from family members and friends, 42% of the money they're borrowing going to just food. 67% are worried about how to pay those loans back. So even though Africa has not suffered as many fatalities as the West and more developed nations from COVID, the fallout, the economic fallout, the number of people falling into poverty. Nigeria is the poverty capital of the world, 77 million versus 88 million for India. India is 5 times our population. The impact from COVID is still enough to where it's while the environment has many fatalities, Rotus, the economic fallout has been pretty bad.
Rotus, if we just hold on, we have a breaking story. A gas station is currently on fire in the Barua area of Lagos. That's it on the screen there.
Brings up the issue of insurance in Nigeria. It's a terrible development that's going on there as far as these gas stations. And you have to think about the location of these gas stations and them being in residential areas. So you have to talk about planning, architectural planning for them, state planning, where these gas stations are located. The fallout from this is, of course, going to be property damage. You're going to be displacing more people out of their homes. The insurance penetration in Nigeria is only about, 1%? Right. So a lot has to be done with respect to these tragic instances of fires and explosions that continue to hurt Nigerians and kill people. This is a terrible development that we're seeing here.
But, we have more details on that incident. You are quite right about insurance and the threat to life and property. According to an update provided by the Director General of the Lagos State Emergency Management Agency, Dr. Femi Osoyintolu, the fire was started by an explosion, which occurred about 5:45 a.m. Nigerian time. Well, the thing to worry about is that these explosions occur all the time.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
If it's not a gas station, it's a gas
Pipeline?
pipeline, or it is a petrol tanker, and oftentimes, so much damage is done, and we don't know the extent of the damage that has been done in this particular one, but it happens too frequently. Well, but Rotus, I don't know whether we still have more time to comment quickly on what the stories you brought. I think with the WTO, we are almost there, and we're hoping that the 164 heads of delegations will vote for Nigeria. But whatever is the case, for the first time, it is certain that by November 7, we'll be having a woman as head of the WTO. And you are quite right about the priorities. WTO reform is one of those priorities. China-US trade is part of it. And then the capacity of the World Trade Organization to be able to serve the purpose for which it was originally set up. As for ASU, well, there's no time to give a lengthy commentary on that. But the point to note is that public officials should refrain from talking down on groups within society who have grievances. Yes, we've criticized ASU on this program, but the point that ASU is talking about is a certain agreement, 2009 agreement, and a subsequent memorandum of understanding that was signed, and then, strengthening the education sector in Nigeria. Yesterday, somebody was showing pictures of University of Nigeria, Nsukka, which is one of the top universities in this country. Look at the extent of the infrastructure decay in that institution. And then you now have the Minister of State for Education telling the professors that they just want to collect money, and where do they expect the money to come from? Now, that kind of arrogance is not a way to operationalize public policy.
Right. Agreed.
Right. Another thing we should learn in Nigeria, public space, is public empathy. Really very important. If we do that, we'll be a whole lot better for it. And that's all on News Headline. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have Michael. Michael will talk to us to give us updates on global business outlook. Stay with us. All right, my pleasure still having you right here and having the pleasure of your company on the Rise News channel this lovely morning. We'll move over to Michael in London now. Michael, how are you doing?
Good, fine, thank you. Markets in Asia. Good morning. Markets in Asia basically coming to a halt because of that vice presidential debate, which you've been discussing in detail. And I think, as Laurie was saying, the importance of this to investors is that you're looking at two of the oldest competitors as far as the president's office is concerned, and therefore, the mind naturally goes to the vice presidents and so on, and you're trying to see whether they would actually do anything different or whether there was any detail. There wasn't any detail. If I could make a slight comment about it, I thought it was moderated slightly better, a much tighter grip on everything, but both candidates, as Laurie was saying, just trod extremely carefully, and basically Asia did nothing as a result of that. I'll come on to the other markets around, but basically China returns tomorrow, and the Nikkei up about 1%, Hong Kong up about 1% as well. US government's going to target Tencent, apparently, which is a Chinese company, and Ant Financial for possible restrictions, so that will constrict the Chinese markets. Well, actually, will it? I don't know. Let's have a look, see what the reaction is when I speak to you tomorrow about that. But the Australian Stock Exchange jumped about 1%. Japan current account surplus, it increased to 2.1 trillion yen, but a big fall in imports. That's really what flattered that kind of figure. So therefore, the Bank of Japan governor, Kuroda, stated that domestic policy was really the most important thing. And basically central banks are saying that about all their economies right now, as did the FOMC and yesterday, and as also the Reserve Bank of New Zealand did. Here's a good one for you. In Asia Pacific, there are now 2,189 billionaires globally, total wealth of 10.2 trillion. It's the highest number of ultra-high rich individuals in the world, much higher than the Americas, Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So that's where you make your fortune. And obviously, what they've made their money in is profits from the pandemic, which are obviously technology and healthcare industries too. And they got in very well. Let's go to the debate then. And as Laurie was saying, yeah, they clashed over Kamala Harris saying that this was the worst handling of the worst failure in the history of the US administration. And on Tuesday, actually, we're talking about this corona relief package, the stimulus package, which has actually not worked. And basically, the president of the United States, Donald Trump, is saying that he's withdrawn from it, basically, and that just halted stocks yesterday and effectively puts a great deal of doubt over them today. He did, however, say he called on both Republicans and Democrats to work together to accomplish a couple of things. One was a $25 billion stimulus package for the airline sector and an idea of 1,200 one-off stimulus payments to individuals as well. Nancy Pelosi naturally said it was a missed opportunity. US stock markets not too bad. Now, the Federal Reserve, this is the interesting thing from their minutes of their last FOMC meeting. These minutes obviously came out last night. And I did say to you yesterday, a little bit out of date they would be. Well, they were, of course, but they did voice a considerable amount of concern that the politicians had not got together to try to do anything about this stimulus package. And also, they were particularly worried about lower income workers being affected by this. And traders aren't happy about that. And actually, if you're a politician, this is going to be fertile ground to go into that election with. The US dollar fell yesterday, and that was really about the roundup. So most of the attention on that vice presidential debate for what it was worth. I don't think it was worth a great deal, but there we are. UK-EU trade talks still continuing. There's a softer approach to that. David Frost, who's the UK's chief negotiator, said that a deal is possible, but a no-deal outcome is possible also too. So very helpful indeed, not really. Commodities, oil markets traded sideways, really. I thought they would. Nothing from that debate's going to help them. We're more concerned about Hurricane Delta in the Gulf. If it stays weak, then the oil rally will naturally run out of steam, and vice versa. And poor initial job claims, we'll come on to that in a second, could affect it too. Gold, modestly up overnight as the US dollar fell. They tend to work in tandem, obviously, because gold is priced in dollars, and therefore the dollar gets cheaper, then gold becomes more attractive. And finally, looking ahead to 1:30 today, we get the US weekly jobless claims. Again, just a not very accurate snapshot, but it will give a flavour of where the markets probably will end up this evening.
Okay, I want to quickly take you up on this real quickly. President Trump tweeted yesterday that, he could do the $1,200 package, sign it up for people so they can get that money in the pocket. But the bigger deal, he's not ready to take a look at it. Will this gambit help him in the long run? And will it help the American economy? Because you talked about the FOM meeting yesterday, and it's not looking good. America needs that money to be able to stabilize its economy and move things forward, despite, how COVID has ruined the economy so badly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it needs it. We call it helicoptering money, don't we? Just actually dropping money into people's pockets. Yes, so that they can hopefully spend it as far as the economy is concerned. I think it's absolutely vital. I think a stimulus package, as I've been saying to you over the past couple of months, I think it's very important that politicians actually agree on this. A, to get the economy going, but B, to show they actually care about the voters, But I think that really the big concern about the Fed last night is the most important one, which is it's the lower income workers that are going to suffer most, and they do have votes. And I'd throw it open to you. I mean, where would you expect these people to put their votes when the election comes up on November the 3rd if they're not feeling A, very prosperous, which they won't be, and B, very hopeful about finding a new job, again, which they won't be as far as I can see.
Well, Michael, I was going to ask you about the future of London as the financial capital of Europe. Now that the financial giants seem to be moving jobs and offices to the 27 EU countries. But I don't think we have more time for that, maybe tomorrow. we'll talk about it in terms of the implications for investors in particular.
Let's do that. I'd be delighted to talk about it tomorrow. Yeah.
All right. Great one. Great one. We'll just bookmark that. We'll push it up to tomorrow. Aaron, how's it going? Are we taking Regeneron?
We'll be talking about that a whole lot this morning because that seems to be making major headlines in the United States.
Just know that Regeneron is the name of the company.
Yes. Okay, so we're talking about their antibodies and their drug, which has become very popular right now in the US, and several people are actually talking about it. And also, their stocks are actually up by 6% as of this morning. So good news for them, and thanks to President Donald Trump. But in the meantime, looking at the global outlook on COVID-19, at the moment we have well over 36 million confirmed cases globally at the moment, and over 1 million deaths are still counting. Looking at how things are actually playing out in 188 countries. But a special focus, and let's chime into what is happening in Brazil. And because when you look at, first of all, let's look at the breakdown of COVID-19 globally, as we actually can see that it's actually up. Well over 300,000 cases were recorded in the last 24 hours, as you can actually see, up by 7%, and over 5,000 deaths, almost 6,000 as a matter of fact, up by another 14% in the last 24 hours. But looking at Brazil right now, Brazil is actually having numbers. They've actually crossed the 5 million mark in terms of infection rates in that particular country, in the South American country, well over 5 million at the moment. Yesterday, the numbers coming in, over 31,000 were recorded. Although it's down by 8%, but deaths also are down by 12%, having 148,228. As a matter of fact, putting that into context, only the United States has more deaths recorded in terms of COVID-19 deaths than Brazil at the moment. So it's still a big red flag. We know that India and Brazil are hot on the heels on the United States, and likely in the coming months they might overtake the United States in infections, maybe not in the number of deaths. But moving away from that, at the moment, let's look at Nigeria. A lot is actually happening in Nigeria in terms of COVID-19. When we talk about numbers actually decreasing, then we might be attributing it to lack of testing or the willingness to actually even test. But right now, on the entirety of this week, up until this point, the numbers of deaths have not shifted. 1,113 has been the number for the better part of this week, and yesterday being an example. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the number of deaths have been static. 1,113 have been the number of deaths. So as it is right now, our CFR, that is the case fatality ratio, is actually dropping here in Nigeria, which is actually a good one. That means it is not as lethal as it used to be at the moment. But we're still watching the numbers and looking at how things are actually playing out. Yes, we've been speaking about President Donald Trump. We know that he has actually resumed at the Oval Office, and he's begun work again at the Oval Office. So good one for him as he returns back to the White House fully. We know he was actually cooked up at his residence there at the White House, but right now he's returned fully to the Oval Office, and he's beginning to get back to his workflow once again. But of course, he made an announcement that has been shaking up the entirety of America, as a matter of fact, because he spoke about the Regeneron drug. It's an antibody drug. We've been speaking about antibody drugs being the latest thing to actually help. And he said that he spoke about how it was given to him on Friday and how it actually helped and aided his recovery from COVID-19. And a lot of people, based on that, have been signaling their intention of being part of a trial. At the moment, they cannot roll it out, but as it stands right now, they are still testing and still trying to acquire data in terms of this particular antibody drugs. And if they can actually help us with the next slide, it would actually even help us explain where they are right now. This is what they have been doing so far in the last couple of days, talking about Regeneron. You can actually see them at the moment. They've actually approved 7, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration in the US, have actually approved 7 of their drugs at the moment. And at the moment you look at it, 100% of the drug candidates invented and developed in-house. So you look at, they are actually an America by America. And when you look at it, plus 20 product candidates in clinical development across multiple therapeutic areas, which is not enough for them to be able to say the efficacy of this particular drug. So They're sending more people, and from what is happening, they are actually getting more people because volunteers are actually showing up in their numbers. Now, the point is this. Dr. Sean Conley, talking about President Donald Trump's doctor, actually spoke about the fact that the president has started producing his own antibodies, and that has been a big boost because it's also confusing at the moment because we're not even sure if they can actually help us. At the moment, when you actually have COVID-19, this is what actually happens. Of course, from the incubation period, when you start having symptoms, the body starts producing an IgM. That is the body's antibodies at the moment, which is the IgM. You can actually see it in the first 7 days. You start producing that. After a while, the body starts producing, thanks to probably maybe some other drugs coming in, the body starts producing IgGs. And we're not even sure right now because we are in almost after that stage, we are almost at that place whereby you are not sure if it's the IgG that comes from the Regeneron drug or if it is the president's antibodies that have actually kicked in and started producing the IgGs. But at the moment, Regeneron are saying that there is a huge likelihood that the antibodies that have been witnessed in the system of President Donald Trump might be from their own drug, not from his own body. But at the moment, it's still touch and go because you cannot tell. Because based on this science we're actually seeing here, it takes a while. It takes over 30 days before you begin to understand whether or not whether or not it is the drugs that have actually provoked the body to produce these antibodies or it is the body itself producing the antibodies we are talking about. So at the moment, we're still not sure of how efficacious that particular drug is.
All right, Aaron, remember a couple of weeks ago,
yeah,
I told you about a special name that was going to change everything. A pharmaceutical company called Eli Lilly. And I told you, go research them. They, too, they've got an antibody drug going on, just like Regeneron has got, and they've pushed to the FDA to say, okay, you know what? Let's fast-track the process so that people can use this. But you talked about, you talked about Trump going back to the Oval Office. A lot of people say that's quite very bad because the Oval Office is in the West Wing, and he has to commute from the residence into the West Wing, which is quite very bad. He's still going to meet a lot of people, and he could still spread, the coronavirus to some other people that he meets on the way, which is quite very shocking. It was breaking news when he was in Oval Office yesterday. But anyway, he replied by saying he wanted to go take a quick briefing in there. Only Mark Meadows was with him in the Oval Office, which a lot of people are looking at. Trump shouldn't be doing this. He should wait the entire course of 2 weeks. He should get a negative report, a COVID-19 negative report, before he moves back to the Oval Office. Because it's going to infect a lot of people in the West Wing, which have been affected already. All right, Aaron. But we'd like to say a big thank you. We don't have time to talk as much as we want to talk.